Thank you everybody for coming. I think we're about ready to get started. My name is Stacey Federoff. I'm the president of the Women's Press Club of Pittsburgh. And like I said, I wanted to thank you all for coming. The Women's Press Club of Pittsburgh, if you have never heard of our group, is the second oldest women's press club of its kind in the country. And we strive to honor our past and forge into the future by providing a place for the news media, including journalists, public relations professionals, writers, editors, photographers, broadcasters, and their supporters. The Press Club was founded in 1891, so we are celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. So, as you all probably know, we're here to discuss the use of the singular they in journalism, and I want to introduce our panelists. First we have Scott Kiesling, a linguistics professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Scott has taught at the University of Pittsburgh since 2000. His work on men and masculinity began in 1990 when he recorded a conversation among fraternity men for a course on conversation analysis, which was then the seed for his 1996 dissertation, Language, Gender, and Power in Fraternity Men's Discourse. Among his publications are 3 books, Linguistic Variation and Change, The Handbook of Intercultural Discourse and Communication with Christina Bratt-Paulsen and Elizabeth Ringel, and Intercultural Discourse and Communication, The Essential Readings with Christina Bratt-Paulsen. So welcome, Scott. And then next we have Danielle Fox, who is the editor-in-chief of the Pitt News. She also is a spring editorial intern for the Carnegie Museum of Art's Publications Division. She's previously worked for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Pittsburgh City Paper, and Hot Press Magazine in Dublin, Ireland. You can follow her on Twitter at FoxDDanielle. She is a senior from Tamaqua, PA, majoring in English writing, the nonfiction track. Danielle. And next we have Dena Stanley. 13 years ago, Dena Stanley decided to move from Pittsburgh to Atlanta to begin her transition. During that time, she endured many trials and tribulations that would later define the woman you see today. Based upon the personal and professional experiences of her and other trans women, Dena has returned to Pittsburgh to start Trans Uniting, an organization that empowers, educates, and provides awareness for transgender people. Trans Uniting also provides an opportunity for anyone to support, encourage, and enhance the lives of those individuals transitioning. She has been back in Pittsburgh since August of last year, and she works closely with Project Silk and other organizations to uplift, educate, and help with job placement and workplace rights in the African American trans community for all her trans brothers and sisters. She's also a pastry chef who operates and owns Mad D's Sweets, as well as works for the baking department at Pitt. So there are cupcakes over there. And then finally, we have Charlie Deitch, who is a 23-year veteran of the news game, starting out as a sports writer for his hometown paper, the East Liverpool Review, in 1993. From there, he covered hard news at papers in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Louisiana before returning to the Pittsburgh area in 2000. He was the last staff writer for the former In Pittsburgh News Weekly, where he spent most of his time covering the issue of indefinite detention of legal immigrants by the INS. His work resulted in the release of a Laotian man who had been held in a small county prison for more than 3 years. In 2005, he joined the staff of the Pittsburgh City Paper as part-time reporter. He was named news editor in 2007 and promoted to editor in September 2014. He's the winner of 13 Golden Quill Awards from the Press Club of Western Pennsylvania, including 2 Ray Spriegel Awards for Best in Show. In 2000, he co-authored the Investigative Story of the Year, awarded by the Louisiana Press Association. So thank you again, all our panelists, for being here. So how we're going to move forward, I thought, is first we'll have each person talk a little bit about their perspective as it relates to the singular they in journalism or just in their own experience. I know that for decades the singular they was part of the conversation and you could say grammar controversy to avoid the generic he, especially during the 60s and 70s with the women's movement. And I think Scott might touch on that a little bit. There's that school of thought that has long been debated back and forth to replace he or she with a singular they. But I think in the last several years, there has also been the added layer of the singular they for people who identify as transgender or non-binary. So while the grammar side of things is important, and I brought several books because you can find different ways to deal with the singular they differently in many grammar books. I think what we wanted to focus on was the way that the singular they can be used to be more gender inclusive in writing, especially in journalism. So I wanted to start off with Scott, who will give you a presentation that includes some of the historical background and use of the singular they.
All right, and I will try not to bore you too much. Hopefully it'll be interesting. So I'm a linguist, which means, of course, I study language. So I'm going to give you the linguist perspective. If you like singular they, this will probably give you lots of ammunition because it's kind of from that perspective. So that's why I said it's how to live with a singular they, a linguist perspective. It looks like I made this big presentation, but really I wrote a bunch of notes and then said I could just slap these on some slides, and then I had fun with it. So that's where we went. Okay, I think if I go like can everybody read this? Okay, I'm not gonna fiddle then, if everybody's okay and they don't worry about aesthetics too much, that what they have there is good. Okay, so the first thing that a linguist learns, probably day one in Ling 101, is that language changes in dialogue with social change. So language changes, period. It always changes. It always has, and it always will, unless we undergo some strange evolutionary shift. And social change is part of that. You can figure out where change is going to happen based on how people move, who they talk to, and things like that. So they are always in dialogue, and one of the things that comes up with stuff like this is, oh, well, we need to wait until there's something going on in gender before we change language. We won't change anything by changing the language, but in fact, they change together, and so you sort of have to nudge each one in one way, and this will not happen. In 1973, Robin Lakoff, who was writing basically the first kind of feminist linguistics tract, said all kinds of things about language in women's place, which is the title of the book, and she actually said that we should just keep using generic he because it will never change. And of course she's wrong, because now we use he and she and all kinds of other things already. So that's going on. The other thing to think about is that language change is social change, because language is a social thing. So if you do something different with your language, you're doing some kind of social change. So if people say, well, that's not going to help anything, you can say, well, it just did. I just did something that was social change, and I've already started it. So we just keep going from there. So that's another tenet. I actually stole that from Debbie Cameron. So, and if you're interested in more linguistic things, Deborah Cameron is one of the best writers on language and society. Thirdly, speaking more clearly to what we're talking about here, is that the singular they is neither new nor correct, nor incorrect, sorry. This is because I'm trying to do two things at once. So I will do one thing at once. So I want to give you just a really short, brief thing about both of those things, neither new nor incorrect. Okay, so first of all, correctness is a social construct. We can study language scientifically and look at what people actually do with their language, and people always learn their language perfectly. You speak, whatever your native language is. It's a beautiful system. It does all kinds of amazing stuff. It may do it differently than perhaps standard language or the way that newsreaders do it on TV, but they're doing something different than you're doing with your language, and they learned it in a different place. And so what is correct is something that's defined externally from language. So there's no inherent goodness or badness in a language. And this is something that we show over and over in linguistics, and sometimes we have a lot of fun and we take a dialect that people think is really bad and we show how much it's actually much more useful than other dialects, and I can go on for about an hour on that if you want me to, and I won't, but so correctness is a social construct. It's something we write. So the grammar books are the social construct of the correctness. So they're doing something to change the language and they're creating it. So that's why correctness is a social construct. All right, so grammar time. So modern English pronouns, everybody knows how to do this. We have 3 persons and a singular and a plural, okay? So we have 6 places, and then we make this distinction down here with gender, right? One place, we make a distinction by gender. Don't know why, because we could say, well, whenever I speak, I have to use the masculine I, and somebody who's feminine has to use the feminine I. There are languages that have this. Hindi has this. There are markers for first person in different places, and you have to do this depending on gender. So, first of all, we only have it here. So it's kind of weird, right? So that's just a weird thing about the paradigm. So a little history lesson involved in this. We also have this weird thing where we already use a plural for a singular or a singular for a plural. We can't tell because they're the same thing, right? We have you and you. In fact, it used to be plural and singular, so we used the you for the singular. And we then, way back, we alternated between a thou and a you. So if you go to Shakespeare, you hear thou because people use thou. We're going to get to Shakespeare a little bit. Okay, so we already have this weird thing going on with plural. So that's another reason why they over here wouldn't be weird. There's your he, she, it. Okay, so so what would it look like if we did something that was completely clear and we had made all the distinctions we wanted to make? Well, it would look something like this, right? So we have a nice new word over here, say yins, maybe. Southerners might prefer y'all. And we just do away with this and we'd have it, and it would just mean third person singular here. Now, it sounds weird because we make an animate distinction too, an animate, non-animate distinction, and people don't like to be called its, right? So it would be weird, but it would be a beautiful paradigm and it would work just fine. So if we wanted to be really nice and clear and organized, this is probably what we would do. Or we could just do this one, which is what we're talking about here, and it kind of makes sense too. All we're doing is saying, well, in general, we're going to get rid of this distinction. Sorry you guys can't see, I don't know. We're going to get rid of this distinction between singular and plural. If we really wanted to, we could make we the singular first person as well. This happens all the time. The Queen does it. She says we for herself all the time, although perhaps speaking about the entire country. So, so it's perfectly fine to do this, and it's the way that languages make these distinctions is completely arbitrary. There are a lot of different ways you can make these distinctions. So historically, the only reason why we have some gender left is because in English, gender marking began as this grammatical distinction. And what we mean by a grammatical distinction is everything in the world was organized in terms of masculine, feminine, and neuter. So even microphones, well, they didn't exist at that time, but everything that was an it had to have masculine, feminine, and neuter. So we had those distinctions. Here's a really scary picture. You don't have to learn this. There will not be a test on Old English and what you had to do in Old English. So you had to know the ending in Old English depending on whether you had a singular or a plural, and it was different if it was a feminine, a masculine, or a neuter. And if the case changed, in other words, if it was a subject, an object, an indirect object, or it was a possessor, that's these things here. And if you want to get into grammar, we can do that, but hopefully it's not scaring you too much. The point is, there's a lot of stuff here a lot of distinctions that we used to make, and guess what? We got rid of them. We got rid of almost every single one of them, and now we just say ship. Except for when we make a plural, we say ships, and when we say it's the ships sail, we use an S as well, which gets confusing over here. So we like to just get rid of stuff in English and make it really simple and try to figure it out. So we're okay with that. We're pretty good at it. And so that's a little short, very short history lesson of what happened in English. But these grammatical distinctions, such as gender, but in general, linguists call them noun classes, are arbitrary. Often they relate to cultural ideologies, in other words, things that are important we make distinctions for, but not always. But we have them, and there are languages that make lots of these distinctions. For example, Swahili has 8 singular noun classes. So there are 8 things you have to know about how to form a word in Swahili, just in the singular. When you have the plural, you have another 8, so it's 16. So that's a lot of noun classes. That's a lot of genders, and it's probably hard for us to keep in our mind. 16? No, it's actually 8 genders that you would have. So a noun gender then was a noun class. Okay, so I'm just showing you what language does with stuff and why we can mess with it if we want to. This is just to show you what Swahili is like. These are pictures of the words. These are the different classes. You can't see it, so I made it bigger. And so class 1 has usually to do with, I think, people, and I think these are made things, and these are natural things. I don't have them memorized. I don't speak Swahili. I just looked it up. But you can look it up if you want, and it's really hard to learn. I've had students who've learned Swahili, and it's hard because you have to know the base word, and then you have to know what class it is so you can put it in a sentence correctly. Okay, so it's really complicated, but the way that they organize these is something that is cultural, it's arbitrary, and they could do it a different way if they wanted to. So that's my point. Gender is the same way, it's arbitrary, and it's even uneven in our pronoun system. All right, so that's that. Singular they is old. I told you it wasn't new. Here comes the old part. Shakespeare, yay. If you want to say something is good in English, you just say Shakespeare did it, and you're like, done. I just take the mic and throw it on the floor and walk away, right? So there we go. Shakespeare did it. So there. In fact, the article that I stole this from is Shakespeare used singular they, so there. So here you go. So there's not a man I meet but doth salute me as if I were their well-acquainted friend. So there you go. There is a singular. So this is... And we know for really clear because the antecedent is a man, right? A man. Okay, so it's singular. This one is a little bit more complicated. The only thing that's really important to see here is that he has every one, and it's a single one, themselves, right? So they, plural, is agreeing. So that's another cool thing. He's actually agreeing a singular with themselves. All right. Old stuff. Well, that was old. We used they a long time ago. What happened? Well, people decided they needed to write down the rules of language. Thomas Wilson is cited as one of he's cited as the first to write some of this stuff down, and he's the first to say something about gender in language and how we are supposed to organize it. So before these guys, we just talked the way we wanted to. Right? We just used language. There wasn't anybody writing a dictionary or writing a grammar, this stuff didn't exist. We just talked. And then some very important people, Mr. Wilson here he was a counselor to Queen Elizabeth, which is kind of interesting. But he sort of invented this idea, and basically right here he's saying we should use he or she and not she or he, that man should come before woman. So this is the first place that somebody mentioned that. And then later on, people started to say, well, we should use the masculine for the generic rather than something else, and we should not use they. And so, funnily enough, this came from a woman, Ann Fisher, but it was for a long time attributed to another grammarian who stole it from Ann Fisher, and he got all the credit for a long time. But that's another story. The point is that she was saying that you should use generic he, you should just use he and not he or she. So this is something that has been going on for a long time, and the grammarians have been trying really hard to get rid of singular they, to use something else, either he or she, or just he. But guess what? It hasn't happened. It keeps going on and keeps going on and keeps going on. So it's really hard to prescribe this stuff. So that means also, if you want everybody to use they, singular they, it's also going to be difficult to convince everybody in the world to do that. And just as a personal anecdote, I can tell you that it's very, very difficult. I know some people who like to use they, and I slip up all the time. I just make mistakes. And in other words, does the pronoun use make a difference? Well, it must, because it's so hard to change what I'm doing, right? I'm a linguist. I know what I'm doing. I know all this crap. And I still, like, it comes out of my mouth. She. I'm like, oh, they. You know, and I don't want to use it, but it comes out. So our use is so automatic. So clearly it's making some kind of difference. I'm almost done, folks. So, reminder, language, does it make a difference? Language changes social change. If we're not using binary pronouns, we're actually not thinking about that binary difference. Gender inequality is a foundational. You don't have gender inequality if people don't think about gender as much. If you don't talk about it in your pronouns, you're not going to think about it as much. So yes, it makes a difference both psychologically, it's hard to do if you're not thinking about it, and socially. And so that's just my lesson. That's my sociolinguistic view of singular they, a long tour of all kinds of different things. Oh no, I have more. I told you these were just my notes. This is something that we talk about, habitual thought. It's like automatic thought. So it doesn't mean you can't think of a singular they, it just means that it's harder to automatically say it. And that's basically what I was just saying about my mistakes with using they with my friend. So it makes us focus on gender, and so we have to do it, right? If you have to make that distinction, you have to think about it. And so if you have to find out what the person's gender is, then it makes you focus on it. And if you don't, then it's not such a big deal anymore, and we can sort of get past it maybe. So that's the story. I have sources for all of this. I don't know if anyone's going to put these anywhere, but I can send them to you if you want. All kinds of good stuff. This page, Everybody Loves Their Jane Austen, has tons of citations of they from Jane Austen, because Jane Austen people are crazy. And there's a whole bunch of other good stuff in there, but I have them there, because I'm an academic, so I have to give my sources, right? All right, I'm done.
Well, thank you, Scott. So, I guess I wanted to ask you a few, we'll move on to the next panelist, and then I'll come back to you next questions. So, next we have Danielle.
You want me to come up there or sit here or what?
Sure, why don't you come up to the...
Great.
We'll just continue to take musical chairs.
I do not have a beautiful presentation to share with you, so you're going to have to look at me the whole time, so bear through it. But I also am not academic, I'm just an editor of a newspaper, so I do not have anything very brilliant to say to you right now. But I want to walk you through how we at the Pitt News established our various policies on gender neutral language, on using they, and just kind of how we've been discussing it and been engaging this dialogue as it's been happening on our campus. So as of, I'd say like beginning of last April, the Pitt News did not have a policy on they. We did not interact, we weren't asking people at that time what their pronouns were, and people were not making us, as far as for most of the stories, maybe like a couple times in our history, people were not making it known to us if they were not using something within the binary. So that was just kind of a long history of oversight on our part. And so the moment that it actually kind of came to a head, us not talking about this, us not engaging in that dialogue, was after a visit by Laverne Cox in April. So we covered it, we gave the whole front page to her visit, we covered it with video, front spot online, we really thought it was an important topic. Then in the article, we misgendered someone. So that was terrible. That was really bad of us, and it was because we weren't asking. So from there, how we found out that we had misgendered someone is Twitter. So that we were getting a lot of tweets saying, this is Trans Visibility Day and you have misgendered someone, what is going on with you? And yeah, what was going on with us? So at that moment, we did an editorial establishing our policy as always, that we will always accept they, even though at that moment Associated Press did not have any standard for they. So we said, we will let you choose your pronouns however you want them to be, and we will ask. That didn't necessarily close the book on the subject at all. In September or sometime in the fall semester, I established a new policy of more gender neutral language. So instead of using spokeswoman or freshman, we used first year and just spokesperson to kind of also continue that conversation. And then we actually every reporter then was part of their training process to ask every source, what pronouns do you prefer? And that was the language we were using at that point. What pronouns do you prefer? And as far as, we're a student newspaper, so people are constantly cycling in, cycling out, are coming for us from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of speaking points, privilege, platforms. So people are coming at different educational levels about these subjects. So we were telling people, you need to ask, you need to tell us. And we were running into problems where even if they said they did, they might have actually not, or maybe they said, oh yes, she uses she, but they heard from that person's friend that she uses she, and they didn't ask that person who actually goes by they. So we were just running into problems of accountability, and Campus Women's Organization came to us and said, listen, you are continuing to mess up. And we were. So, and they said they're not going to talk to us anymore, and we said that is fine, that is correct, and we need to establish a new policy. So now, as of kind of in the last month, we have a new policy to make sure we always get the correct gender pronouns and everything. So we worked with Campus Women's Organization to develop a personal information file form. So basically, I didn't bring you pictures, I'm not that organized, but we now are establishing an online Rolodex and a print Rolodex of before any interview that has to deal with any intersection of gender, sexuality, self-expression, down the list. Someone, we have to interview them, a pronoun, trigger warning, just subject area form that then gets sent back to the editor so I can fact check and approve that pronouns are happening correctly. And we also have established a print form that are given out during event interviews. So that is, as far as I know, we do not know any other college newspapers doing this kind of system. This was just what we came up to make sure no one would slip through the cracks. Because as I talked with the presidents of campus women organizations, we do recognize that misgendering someone and not following and using the proper they and pronouns is an act of violence against that person. So that's just something that at the Pitt News we're working through. We're trying to teach everyone who joins our staff about and coming up with different solutions. It has never been an issue at the Pitt News of someone not believing that we should have these kind of policies or not believing that we should let people choose their own pronouns. It's always just been an issue of people not realizing that that's a discussion we need to have. So that's just something we're doing to put that at the forefront. That's about all I have to say.
Thanks, Danielle. Okay.
Well, mine is not that great. It's just very brief, but I definitely think the Pitt News for doing what they're doing. That's really groundbreaking, and hopefully other schools follow suit to that, and that to talk to a person or to write anything about them or anything like that, then not use the right pronouns. It just, that could be devastating to that person. So, definitely kudos to you for doing that, and I hope other schools follow suit to that. Thank you so much.
Not only do I not have a nice presentation, I have no presentation. It's sort of the way I've kind of things I've done my whole career as a journalist. and I want to say up front that I've been a journalist for 23 years, but I ain't no grammarian, that's for sure. I know how to hire great copy editors. I'm more of a content person, and that's always sort of been my background. I'm a content editor first and foremost, and the history of using referring to or by using gender pronouns at the city paper has basically been we would use whatever pronoun that the individual identifies with. However, if they don't identify if they were gender fluid, the policy was, before I got into the job, the policy was use whichever pronoun comes closest to the way the person appears to you, and then write around it as much as you can. And that was a policy even as news editor for many years that I disagreed with, and I would, when it would come up, and it's funny, it didn't come up as often as I always thought it would, but when it would come up, I would once again bring up the fact, look, I think we need to deal with this. And there were some younger staff members who felt the same way, but we have some staffers who felt that it was more important to follow the rules of grammar. So last August, our music editor came to me with an issue. She was doing a feature story on a musician. Their name is Bean Kalani Tupou. If I were to look at Bean, I would say I would use the gender pronoun she if I didn't ask. But she's gender fluid. She uses they as the pronoun. So we're sitting in a news meeting, and she brings this up, and this is the first time it probably came up during her tenure, and she said, "How should we approach this?" And as I went to answer and start a discussion, one of the grammarians in the room spouted out, "This is our policy, cut." So I said that maybe that sort of thing would change. And so probably I thought about it for 2 or 3 days. I did research, I looked things over. I'd seen that it was a topic of discussion at the Association of the Copywriters Association. And so I thought, well, if these are people who their job, their job is to deal with words on a daily basis, that if they think that the times need to change, I thought we needed to change too. And I didn't have any further consultation. One of the perks of being the editor, I just sent out an email that said, "This is what we're doing from here forward. I don't want to hear your complaints." Of course I heard some complaints, and those also gave me perspective, because if you look at the city paper staff as a whole, I think if Bernie Sanders walked in that room, he'd say, "Hey, you guys need to really calm down on the liberalism. You guys are a little crazy in there." But the far left grammarians in the room, they stuck to their guns that that this was a bad decision, and it led to some raised voices and conference room discussions, and eventually, I still don't know if everyone agrees with it. Most people agree with it, but that's what we do. And I felt that it was a decision that had to be made, especially at City Paper, where we screw up like everybody from time to time. But we've always covered gender issues for as long as I've been with the paper, and we're actually doing a 25-year history project this year. And so I'm reading city papers from the last 25 years. And we've always been concerned about gender issues and the LGBT community, and how even if other media outlets in the city decide that they're going to do one thing or another, we've always taken the different path even if it meant breaking rules, breaking AP style or something like that. And so for me, this was a no-brainer. As I wrote in a column announcing the change, I have a deep respect for the English language, but I have a deeper respect for people. And how can I tell you that I can't refer to you by the pronoun that you prefer because it doesn't fit in a little blue spiral book. I have a real old AP style book, so that's why I think it looks like that. But it's something that I couldn't stand for anymore, and we've always used, and the thing is, we've always used words like spokesperson, we've always used counselor, And I worked at a daily newspaper, a very conservative daily newspaper to start my career. And we always used, their rule was hard and fast. You use he and you use councilman. You use, a spokesman and things like that. And at that point, I complained about it, back in, 1993, 1994 when, nobody was really talking about it. And I think that if we don't talk about it, if we don't, work toward change, things are going to get worse. And I hope that in some way, by making this small change and continuing to, our policy is to make changes on the fly. As they come up, we're talking about them and we're working with them. So I think by continuing to work toward it, and dealing with it, I think that ultimately, I think we're going to be in a place where everybody is adopting something like this. So I think it's a very important topic. Thank you for having me.
So I do have a couple questions for each of you, and then a couple questions that are more open-ended, and then I'm just going to open it up to the floor for questions. So Scott, I think a couple of these questions you touched on a little bit in your presentation, but how does the historical context that you showed us inform the way that journalists specifically think about gender?
Well, I think it goes to what he was just saying, which is there were people who said, well, this is the English language and it's this sacred thing. Well, actually, it's been changing forever, and there's nothing really fixed or sacred about it. In fact, the joke about English is it chases other languages down dark alleys and shakes change out of their pockets. But so I think that's the biggest lesson, is that there is this history. One of the things that happens with people who are really connected to correct language is this idea that it is this timeless thing that has always been there. And you often get authority from things that are seen as being timeless, right? And as soon as you start saying, well, actually, it's not timeless. It hasn't been like this forever. It hasn't even been like this for 100 years, maybe. Then it starts to break down quite a lot. So I think it's a pretty important perspective.
And can you share? You mentioned that it's the American Dialect
Dialect Society.
Dialect Society chose the singular they as the 2015 word of the year, but also chose she as the word of the millennium.
Of the millennium, yeah. Because she is a pronoun, as you know, and those tend not to change very quickly. So the fact that we got in English a new pronoun, newish pronoun, it comes from heo, and it's very complicated, and some people think the sh comes from some Gaelic stuff, but the fact that it came into the language and that is the gender stuff that sticks around, that was part of the reason why it was the word of the millennium. If you look across languages, if you want to compare languages and see which ones are related, pronouns are a really good place to go, because words that are really frequent, they tend not to change as much as words that are less frequent. So we use pronouns quite a lot, so the fact that happened is pretty amazing. And it used to be a lot closer to the he, and there's all kinds of other stuff. And of course there was this whole thing with cases and everything else too, so. Yeah.
Do you see any wider adoption of some of the alternate pronouns like zir, and I know in Sweden we're trying to use hen.
The Swedes have an advantage because they have an academy, so they have a group of people who can sort of say this, or they have a country that is the only place it's spoken. So English is all over the place. It's this crazy, again, it's this weird language that's just everywhere, which is kind of a colonial thing. But the Americans might do one thing, but then the British will do a different thing, and the Australians, because the Americans and the British are doing something, will most certainly do the opposite of all of that. So you can't do it. So the Swedes have this advantage of saying, okay, we're going to just do this, and everybody does it. And they can do that with spelling and everything else. It's nice and neat. On the other hand, it can lead to somebody has to make that decision, so that's a problem. So good, bad. The Swedes are doing something that is kind of cool, but they could also do the opposite if they wanted to. There are lots. I think having lots of forms around is a great ferment. Variation is what happens. There's always more than one way of saying what you have to say, and the more ways you have to say it, the better. You know, there's all kinds of things that could happen. It could happen that everybody decides eventually to settle on they or something like that, that everybody decides to settle on one of the other ones, or that all of these have different, slightly different shades of meaning that mean that you, if you prefer a particular pronoun, that you sort of orient to gender in a particular way or something like that, that we haven't even thought of. So I'm not even going to suggest anything. But so you might end up with 4 or 5 different singular pronouns that people use it, not interchangeably, but for themselves, and it says something about them. That's a possibility. I don't know if it'll happen. It might be that nothing happens. Language change is very unpredictable. You can't, even the Swedes might have trouble with the top-down approach, but you can't completely force people to do things, but you can nudge things in a direction, and you often get some work, some things that happen, and then you get some of that social change going on too. So you gotta have a lot of options. Something will catch on and everybody will love it. So.
And Dena, I wanted to ask you, I know Danielle touched on this, but what is the significance of personal pronouns to transgender and non-binary people? I know that's a loaded, question.
A little bit of a loaded question, but definitely that it. Okay, so basically, like if you are trans and someone's calling you, he, that's offensive. So you definitely want to, if you don't know or, you're unsure, you should ask them a question, like how to address them, their pronoun, and if you, excuse me, I'm a little nervous. So definitely, if you have any issues or anything like that, or the safe word, like you said, stay is a safe word, and if they say, well, no, my name is blah, 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 or I would rather be called this or that, just, respect their, wishes and, call them whatever they would like to be called.
And how do you think that journalists should approach that? Do they approach it any differently than, if you and I were meeting in a coffee shop or something like that? If someone is officially going to be writing about someone who is transgender or non-binary.
Definitely. I think that if you're talking to them, definitely, because sometimes you write stories about columns like what you were saying and you don't know, and like you were saying also, and you don't know. So if you're talking to them, definitely ask them. That's a polite and respectful thing to do, because you never know. That one thing that you say to that person could be the breaking point for them, and they can kill themselves. These kids are killing themselves every day because they're being bullied and everything like that. So that one word can definitely set a person over and beyond. So definitely, if they're in, if you're having a conversation with them or writing a report about them, or I'll call them, definitely ask, how would you like me to address you, or how would you like me to put this into the story? And if you're not speaking to them, I would say definitely stay with this, maybe a safe word they, because that's a very safe word, because it's not as disrespectful, to society as it, because it is very disrespectful. So I would stick with the singular they, because that's better. But definitely, just ask. Ask. It's always, a question is a question for a reason. So you definitely ask, and they should not, as long as you're not being, malicious in any type of way, then, they will definitely tell you.
Can I jump in on that?
Sure.
Yeah, just to kind of talk more about journalists' responsibility with that. One thing that we started after talking with CWO is just coming as a reporter saying like, hi, I'm Danielle Fox, I use she, her, saying right away to put pronouns in the conversation, and also teaching reporters to not use the word preferred, and to not even say like, oh, we're trying to avoid not even using like, because we understand that a pronoun is an issue of necessity.
Exactly.
So it's like, oh no, we're not doing you a favor, we are just giving you the same respect that we would do by spelling your name correctly.
And that's amazing, and I love it. That is definitely amazing. Like, definitely, if you're speaking to them, definitely ask them. Yeah, definitely.
That's part of the problem, is that when we're making these decisions at first, we're thinking about these as words.
Exactly.
Because to us they're words, but they're not words. Just words to the people that we're dealing with, and the people we're talking to. As Dena said, it's a life and death issue for some of these people. And you know, we've read countless stories about that. And that's what threw me over the edge. It's not about a word. It's about people. It's about who someone is. And that's not my call to make. And so it was an easy decision for me. So.
I just want to piggyback on that. We're all human. So just give the person the respect that you would want, right? Period. At the end of the day, just give a person the respect that you would want.
So Charlie, then, I wanted to ask you, what is your, I mean, in which you touched on, has your own personal thoughts about the issue changed over the years? You know,
there's no question. I mean, I grew up in a pretty small town. My mother was a nurse, my father was a minister, and I think everyone here could probably imagine the words that were used in my house, unfortunately. And so you start to get out on your own, and you start to realize there's more to the world than the little one that you live in. And then, you know, I get into journalism, and you start to, especially, and I came up in daily newspapers where they really stick, a lot of them really stick hard and fast to quote unquote style rules, and they're churning copy so fast that they don't even stop to think about the human aspect of how you're even just simply addressing someone. And so, like I said, when I worked for Ogden Newspapers, the owners of the Pittsburgh Pirates, for many years. I was an editor at one of their papers, and you know, it was a constant discussion about simple things like councilperson instead of, you know, or counselor instead of councilman, and you know, it was a no-win situation. So that's how it developed for me. And then, like I said, at City Paper, before I became the editor, I felt I did all I could to try and get that rule changed, but it wasn't happening. And so when I had the chance to do it, it was a no-brainer to me, no-brainer.
I wanted to ask you about that, specifically with the City Paper. Does a paper that's an alt weekly have a different responsibility regarding policies like this than, say, a mainstream newspaper might? Or any other media outlet, TV station?
I think the short answer is yes. The long answer is it shouldn't be. I mean, the mainstream media should also be paying attention to things like this. We did this while we made our change a few months after the Pitt News. We did it, you know, 5 months before the Washington Post. So some mainstream media newspapers are changing, but I think that the public has a different perspective of what City Paper is and what City Paper should be doing. And we've asked people to look at us that way. We've said we'll tell the stories that no one else tells. We cover issues that other people aren't covering. And so that means a lot of times we're dealing with folks who don't get the coverage. So if we just say, well, we want your story, but we're going to call you her regardless of how you feel. I mean, you can't do that. You can't walk up to someone and say, you have a great story to tell. I'm going to tell it how I want. It's their story. It's their experiences. We're just the vehicle to pass that story on. So it's all about respect.
Danielle, I wanted to jump over to you. Do you think issues like this with gender identity, and gender expression are coming more to the forefront with college students?
Absolutely. I think, every day, every moment, we're pretty much all on college, we're engaging with conversations of gender, especially at our paper. There's hardly a day that goes by where we're not publishing something that has to do with any intersection of gender and sexuality. And I just also think because of different technologies that more people have been invited to the conversation. Like gender studies is no longer any highbrow academic subject. I know I personally came into gender studies and feminism through Tumblr, which is something that across the board, a lot of girls and a lot of people of all genders are talking about this in middle school now because of that. So that increases in the short answer, duh. But
Can I piggyback on that? It's actually a discussion among faculty as well, and it's something that I'm actually in the program, the gender studies program here, and we've actually set out some guidelines about what to do for teachers, for professors, about how to
Like how to address the.
Right, how to address, and also not to make too much a big deal of it, sort of like the whole process, and sort of like not announce to the whole class necessarily, all those sorts of things, sort of the whole thinking about what's going on there, and make it a general part of what you do at the beginning of the year is determine what kinds of pronouns everybody's using and that sort of thing. So I think it's sort of going in that direction too, so it's sort of from both sides.
And I've definitely noticed that change from the professors. I think only within the past 2 years have I been asked my pronoun in a classroom, which is a place where it belongs, and it's just been a change. I think really we've been having a more progressive conversation about gender the past 4 years that I've been here, but it's really picked up this year.
And you touched on this, but how does the changing nature of communication with outlets like Reddit, Tumblr, Twitter, Snapchat, Yik Yak affect gender as it's reflected in the Pitt news, but also the criticism, I guess, that you received any? Or,
Definitely. I think the one great thing about social media in regards to gender is it gives people of marginalized speaking points a voice to directly reach me, reach the Pitt News. And I have the Twitter handle, I get those mentions. And so when we misgender someone, when we quote something in a way that is offensive at any level, I can directly know about that through a tweet, and I do learn about it through Twitter. So it really takes away a gap in the communication. So I get to learn about these issues faster, and I also I think about it more because I get to see the direct effect. If we, for example, say when we had misgendered someone, I could see their tweet letting me know that they were misgendered, and I could also go on their Twitter, see into their personal life how that is affecting them, and it just makes me more cognizant of the pain of just the dialogue.
Stacey, I don't know if Danielle's experiences, but we unfortunately receive complaints on the other side for making the change, and that's where you try and enlighten as many people as you can. I think that we obviously, our readership, it probably falls in line with our sort of editorial, our left-leaning editorial stance, where I think we're on our side, I fall on our side actually. But we are also, we have, it's amazing how many readers City Paper has who are homophobic, who are racist, who I think monitor us just to see what, just to see what's going on, and they love to, tell you how you're wrong. And so I think that those are other ways to get into the fight and sort of address it one-on-one. Danielle, did you guys receive any complaints the other way?
I mean, we receive those kind of complaints every day. I mean, I personally, I don't know what your policy is. Do you tweet at them back about anything or about explaining them? I just kind of let them be trolls.
Yeah, depends on the day.
Because I mean, a lot of ours too, it's like some anonymous person, with like West Virginia in their tagline. Or,
Sure.
I don't know. So it's hard. We do get them, but it's hard to take them seriously.
Sure. I agree with that, but I think that it's an opportunity at the very least. You don't know how many followers they have or how many people in my reach. I think it's at any point to engage them. I think it's important to do so.
So what would you say is the best manner? I'm confused at how to engage.
I don't know.
Where do we start?
Well, I don't know that I'm the best subject or the best person to ask how to
Just tell them thank you.
respectfully engage. I've just been. I think throughout my career, I've never been afraid to mix it up. And if somebody wants to say something like that publicly, I recently received some hate mail from members of my family for a column I recently wrote. So engaging folks isn't, and mixing it up with them a little bit, just even if some of our followers or someone in our comment section happens to see that and they see that, we're not just willing to say it, we're also willing to get down and fight for it a little bit too. And it's you gotta be willing to back it up, stick to it, but also you gotta be willing to back it up and fight for it a little bit too. I think those are the areas as journalists in which we can do that. We try and tell all sides of a story. We do tell all sides of a story. Sometimes we'll say the other side might be full of shit, but we get in there, we tell all sides, but you have to be willing to mix it up and say that from time to time.
But are you doing that from the city paper handle, or are you doing that from your handle?
From my own personal, I mean, I only tweet from my, yeah, we don't do that from the city paper handle. But a lot of what I get is in the comments section, a lot of what I get is from email. It's, it's from my own, I mean, my Twitter handle is, I mainly use for work. But yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid to engage ignorance and intolerance, and you've got to do that.
So point a lesson at them next time.
Yeah. Take them on, Danielle. You were city paper.
Thank you, have a nice day.
I did want to ask you, and I could open it up to everyone. Where do you see Pittsburgh rating as a whole when it comes to, without being too inflammatory one way or the other, where does Pittsburgh rate as a whole when it comes to journalism, gender, and language? There's a lot of work to be done.
Well, no, there is, and I think the perfect example of that is before we ran the story and before we made this change. I'm sure everyone in this room remembers the column written by the Post-Gazette columnist regarding Caitlyn Jenner, in which the headline was "Caitlyn Jenner is still a mister." I engaged like heck in that one, and so. I think that was allowed to run on the paper, in the editorial section of the paper of record of this city. I think we got a big problem, and I think that more people need to get down and work on it.
And I worked at the Post-Gazette during when that column came out, and I think the problem is not, it's the people in charge at this point. There are a lot of people in power in this city who are not involved in these kind of conversations, or not sitting in rooms like this, and journalism in Pittsburgh is still going to be in a bad state until we can promote more people from a diverse area of platforms to those roles.
Well, I'm sorry. I definitely think that Pittsburgh is a very closed-minded city, and doing things such as this and bringing more LGBTQ&A folks to the front line to help out as much as possible, it'll make it maybe a little bit better, but Pittsburgh is definitely a closed-minded city, so it's going to take a lot for them to open up. Definitely.
And the university should be leading a little bit, and I think it's leading a lot more than it was, say, 5 years ago.
I think they
just
are.
leave it.
Definitely, like I said, I work here. I work here. Everyone here knows in my department, and well, the whole school base will, they all know that I'm a transgender woman. I have no issues at all whatsoever. We had a whole big roundtable discussion with everybody before, it got out of hand. So, it was amazing. So I definitely applaud Pitt because they are really on the forefront with the gender pronouns.
And where do you see the intersection of these things moving in the future? And what do you think journalists should keep in mind when they are dealing with these topics? I think we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, we did just a little bit, but I definitely think that really not going to go too far if we don't start stepping up. We definitely, as the people in the LGBT community, have to step up and do a little bit better because it's not really going to go nowhere. It's changing a little bit, but if we want to make a big difference, we have to keep pushing and keep, having panel discussions such as this and going out there and fighting on Capitol Hill and doing different things like that.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions. So I wanted to open it up to anyone in the audience who has any questions.
I have a question for Dr. Kiesling. So at home, I've been practicing on Duolingo every night after work, Spanish, French, just having fun. But so many sentences, in other languages, you wouldn't know, like the subject gets dropped off, and it's just the verb with the ending, and then the subject or the object. So what is the cross-cultural conversation about this? Do you have any,
About the gender pronouns?
Yeah.
Well,
like
I mean,
in other
it's true.
languages
See, the thing is that languages do give you different resources to deal with it. So you're right. If you're dropping the pronoun and just using the verb
Yeah,
to
so
tell
then
what the subject is, then it's not such a big deal. If dropping pronoun, then that's how I would say it, right? Then you don't have to do that, which is more in Spanish. But so it's, I guess it's not as big of an issue, but in written forms, it's going to be still, and you're still going to have that. And then in some languages, for example, in Spanish, there are clitics that you need to use that are going to do connections. And then, of course, you have gender on nouns, as English used to, so that's an issue as well, and that's really hard to have anything to do with. The thing is that that's a grammatical gender, so it's kind of like, how do I know a table is masculine? Well, you just learn it. You don't really think that it has to be, it's masculine somehow necessarily. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Is there any discussion in other cultures about
Well,
neutralizing things?
Yeah, so certainly in Sweden and I think some other northern European countries, that you have that. But I don't know of a lot of other discussions. My student Matthew knows something.
Just to contribute very briefly, in a language like Spanish, which does have masculine and feminine adjectives and nouns, a lot of people prefer X, X, so like instead of like chico or chica for boy or girl, they say chiquex for both singular and plural as a way of doing, it's kind of like their version of the singular they, and so on and so forth. You can use that in many different, whereas it would normally take a masculine and feminine, you would use just the X, and that's becoming more and more popular within the last few years. So that's a way that Spanish at least is trying to do it, because they have been having this sort of talk in many different circles. So.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Danielle Fox, and I'm employed at Project Self. I'm a community outreach specialist, and I work with a lot of people in their transitional stages. And my comment was to Charlie. Although City Paper has adapted policies around the pronouns, it's really hard to use those like in your everyday speaking. I noticed that in your speech, you said you refer to an artist that is gender fluent as she a few times, and I just want to challenge everyone to just treat people with dignity and respect. You have to think how these people are feeling after they're investing so much time and effort into transitioning into who they are and who their identity is. You have to be very respectful and mindful that that can affect someone, and that can affect how they feel, and that can affect their transition.
No, you're absolutely right. And the one note I did make for tonight was really big on the story, was I wrote the word they, because I didn't want to make that mistake. And
Yeah, just be mindful.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I think mistakes happen, but I think you just have to be mindful and respectful. And I obviously came here tonight with the idea, this is the one place. Obviously, you don't want to mess it up. But it's
right.
Yeah, but
mistakes can go a long way. So just
you're absolutely right. You have to
mindful
think about it
when
all the
speaking
time.
on
Yes,
those things, 'cause
absolutely.
that can really affect someone, especially
Absolutely.
if they're early in their transition.
Just to add on to what Dalen, my name's Gary with the Delta Foundation, and I have a very close friend of mine who transitioned from a female to a male, who lives in Atlanta actually, and we always called Chef, which is not a typical name that anybody uses, but we called him Chef forever because his last name is Sheffield. But when he transitioned from female to male, it was very, very difficult using pronouns when you use Chef, but his name is now James. It's real easy when you start using James to use the pronoun that he actually wants to be used, aka, or he, I guess you could say, with a male version. So even taking the pronoun out is one way to do it, but even using something like that whenever they not using nicknames, because a lot of trans folks do use nicknames as they grow. So it's something to be mindful as well. And he is quite fine being called James, that's his name. But he had been called Chef for so long, people had associated her with Chef as opposed to he was Chef. So.
And I control the social media that we use for our organization on site for our project. So when I try to make posts, I try to ask people their specific name that they go by, and I try to ask them their specific pronouns, but usually we can get it by the name. If someone's name is Jasmine, of course, you're going to refer to that person as she.
Thank you.
Before my question, I thought the same thing when the editor was speaking, that he slipped up and said she, but actually, as I listened, and if you watch the playback, you'll see, watch the playback, right? On the review. He actually was, when he was talking about she, he was talking about the music person who was in the room with him. and what she was thinking. And so he wasn't speaking of that particular musician at that time. In any case, Mr. Deitch, I was curious if you ask people about their pronouns with every story that you write, or like the university paper, only where stories have that intersection with things that might be sensitive.
Wait, I want to pause. We do ask for every story.
Oh, so sorry. I must have misunderstood when you were running through your list of different types of articles.
Yeah, we don't ask for every story. I think it becomes, it sort of becomes, at some point I think it becomes natural when you speak, when you're going out on a story, when you're speaking to folks, you know, you can pick it up. We've certainly asked, particularly when we do stories on the LGBTQ community, we ask, and you know, it probably is it's not a bad idea to ask all the time, you know, and but yeah, right now we just sort of we handle it as it comes, and I sort of feel like it's not, we haven't had anything come up that has. I mean, we haven't screwed it up at this point the way we're doing it. So I think that trying to actually keep things natural and kind of keep things fluid, I think is maybe the best way that we can deal with it. Is just, you know, while we want to make it an very important thing, we also want to make it just like it's an everyday thing as well. You know, that we're, you know, we understand, you know, the issue, and that, but we also know how to handle the issue without, you know.
Hi, I'm Madeline. Until recently, I worked for the Tribune Review. In a college campus, this is something that's going to be discussed frequently. A friend of mine whose son is in training for being an RA at the University of Michigan, they were taught when, you know, to find out all of their, on their floor, their quad or whatever they're in charge of, to find out, you know, what each student's, you know, pronoun was. But in a lot of places in the bigger Pittsburgh area, if you were just interviewing somebody and an older person and asked them what, you know, your pronoun was, in most cases they would look at you as if you were crazy. You know, do you have any ideas for how to, you know, bring this out into the world more, or is it just something that, you know, is basically going to kind of age up?
I can speak to that a little. One of our problems is with checking pronouns is, as students, I know a lot of our reporters are more afraid to ask professors or to ask older people who might not be associated. I'd be curious to know if you were ever asked what your pronoun was by a Pitt. Yep. So that is an area where people struggle. It's much more easier across millennials to ask. But for that and what we've talked about by asking people in the community, we've just been told that it's best to introduce ourselves or to give examples, like, what are your pronouns? I use she and her, and so they might be cued to say, oh, he and him. That's just my only answer at this point.
I think for us, we have our turnover isn't as much as you think, but a lot of the folks that we're hiring now are younger people, and they're very cognizant of this change. And I think it's, you know, I think it's probably good to ask someone who's older, who, you know, you may, you know, they probably use he or they probably use she, but if you ask them my guess is though, if you ask them what pronoun they prefer, that they're going to ask you what you mean, and you've started a dialogue. So I think that's just as important.
Any other questions?
So I just want to clarify, if he used the singular they, what verb do you use? Is that really?
Whatever one you feel like. You get to choose. Most people, though, I'll give you the answer. What I've observed is most people will tend to use the plural because grammatically that's what their brain can handle and sort of what's in their grammar. So that makes sense. But because you can argue for it either way, grammatically it's a plural, so you can use plural agreement. You're actually talking about something that's singular, someone who is singular, therefore I can use singular agreement. You kind of can go either way. Now, probably a newspaper will have a style book and say this is how we're going to do it. So that's a nice thing. But I'm a linguist and I just like to look at what people do, and so I can say you can do whatever you want. Eventually, if enough people start using they and start using they generically, we will all decide what we're supposed to do. My guess is it will end up being plural, and that's how it will settle down.
That's what we do.
Yeah, yeah, just like Shakespeare.
Anybody else? Any other questions? If not, I wanted to let you know about the Women's Press Club of Pittsburgh, where you can find us on social media at WPCPGH on Twitter, WPCPGH.org, our website, and Facebook.com/WPCPGH. We have our annual anniversary dinner and journalism awards coming up, where this is the 60th year where we are awarding the Gertrude Gordon Scholarship to some deserving college students who interviewed Janera Solomon of the Kelly Strathmore Theater. And we will also be featuring Jean Marie Laskus, who was the author of Game Brain, the 2009 GQ article that inspired the book Concussion, which then inspired the movie Concussion, starring Will Smith. And the banquet is on April 16th, and you can find more details about that on our website and our social media sites. And I also wanted to say thank you to the staff at Pitt for setting up the room, Harry Cloman, the advisor for the Pitt News, who helped me secure the space, the board of the Women's Press Club of Pittsburgh, and the Pennsylvania Women's Press Association, where we have some more information back on that table with the cupcakes, where I hope you all will congregate after. Also wanted to thank Todd Reeser, the head of the Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies program at Pitt, Christine Bryan, and Gary Van Hork of the Delta Foundation, the Campus Women's Organization, and the Pitt Rainbow Alliance, the Women's Press Club members, Megan Campbell and Kirsten Kennedy. And since I'm a copy editor at the Beaver County Times, I wanted to thank everyone there who put up with me putting together this event. So thank you again to all our panelists, especially to our panelists, if we could give them another round of applause.